Hello, Michael Grubb from Avatar Energy Mastery Institute. Nice to see you. And I thank you so much for checking out the book and checking the video series out that goes with the book. This particular section is on understanding the ego. Now, one good way to look at this is Carl Jung. Okay, so it'd probably be a good idea to check out what his definition of the ego is. And another person to check out, even though he was kind of quirky, was Freud. Okay, because he was the one that defined the ego and the superego. Now, the ego can be considered the autopilot program that operates for you through the DNA code, okay, and through the carbon code separation, which makes it possible. I've talked about this a million times, but it's probably good that I say it again. The carbon code, 6 protons, 6 electrons, 6 neutrons. Okay, so this is the 666 that the quote-unquote Bible was speaking about. Now, this is also explained in the machine, so I don't want to go into too much detail about that, but I will say this. The carbon code of separation is basically what the religions, at least the Abrahamic religions, were talking about in terms of the adversary. Okay? So you can look at the carbon code, alright, as the thing that fosters machine-like or egoic-like tendencies. Okay? So that would be survival of the fittest, or every man for himself. The person who dies with the most toys wins. It's that fight or flight mentality, okay? And it also is a self-serving mentality, okay? Anything that is going to be in a state of separation is definitely going to serve self, okay? Now, all of us here are wrapped into this, so we're all engaging in a state of separation one way or the next. But many of us, as you guys know, are starting to wake up into our infinite selves, okay, into our genuine selves. We're starting to realize exactly who we are, okay? And you need not define it. There's a lot of people that always like to try to define, who am I? Who am I? Well, the fact of the matter is you just are, and you've always been. If you're trying to define yourself in human definitions and those sort of terms, then you're shooting low on the totem pole, alright, if you're really trying to find out who and what you really are. And human definition, human language, the words themselves are not strong enough to describe the power of the human soul. So, you got to kind of give the human soul, if you want to even call it human, because I don't even call it that, is a lot more vast and infinite than we can imagine. The human soul in of itself is a universe. Okay, so it's only when you come into places like this, you know, that are physical and three-dimensional, where we entertain the idea of separation so that one can look at another and say, oh, you're him, I am me, that is her. Okay, so ultimately, separation is there for identification purposes, for the most part. But separation allows us to engage in behaviors that we would normally not engage in within a unified or unified consciousness, okay? So a unified field or unified consciousness would not engage in certain things like murder, fighting, rape, control, war, list goes on and on and on and on. That's not what a unified system does. A unified system realizes that it is intricately connected from one matrices to the next. Okay? So, the system itself is a multiverse. Okay? There's actually even multiple U's, because the whole thing has been digitally copied over and over again, running simulation after simulation. Okay, so this is the reason why the more conscious you can become in zones like this, all right, the more you can act as your own personal black hole or singularity, bringing all your cells back into one space, one mind. Okay? All of us are intricately connected. All of us are actually mirror representation of the one that created it. We are fragments of the one. Okay? The one is pure intelligence. It is pure consciousness. Okay? It can create. It can make worlds. It can duplicate worlds. But for the most part, it is not exactly what people have made it out to be in their minds. And so, in order to understand ourselves, we also got to understand the things of which we put definitions upon, because a lot of who we are and what we do is dependent upon how we think in a religious manner, which in many ways is unfortunate. Have to return back to a spiritual way of doing things. So, nonetheless, the whole point to understanding the self and understanding the ego is so you can understand the tendencies that you have within you that are primal. You got to understand the drive that is within inside of you that oftentimes people tend to ignore and don't try to control within themselves. This is the reason why sometimes we get reckless behavior and stuff like that. So, nonetheless, the ego is the way we define ourselves in places like this. The ego is the way we see ourselves, okay? And it's usually an idealistic version thereof. It's not necessarily the most realistic version. It is most likely the idealistic version. Because oftentimes the ego does not like to look inside and see what it is, what it's made of, what it's really composed of. Okay? Now, I define myself and my accomplishments here and everything that I do is basically under this tag of Michael Grush. Okay, so, and that's the same thing with you. Whatever you've done in your life, it goes under your little personal IP address, which, you know, there's your brain, there's your mind, energy, electricity, and then that is digitally stored within you. Okay? But you have to remember that what you are here is not necessarily what you are out there, if there is an out there. And then what you do here does not define you. What you do can actually help bring a lot of knowledge to you, okay? What you do can bring a lot of experience to you, but it doesn't define you, okay? So if you've made mistakes in the past, oftentimes that egoic portion of yourself tries to bring up those mistakes, and then you end up punishing yourself for no reason, all right? Another thing that the ego tries to do is it is so self-serving and self-oriented that it will inadvertently create enemies where there's no reason to have enemies, okay? So, the ego usually is in a constant state of seeing itself as a victim. Okay, so this is where we get the idea of victim identity and things like that, is because the ego is the thing that basically tells us, hey, I'm me. These people are treating me incorrectly, inadequately. I deserve better. Okay? The thing is what you're hearing there is I, me, me. Well, that is the ego. Okay? The ego is basically the machine part of the program that acts as an autopilot that thinks for us when we're not really thinking for ourselves. And believe me, if we choose not to think for ourselves or enact for ourselves, there's going to be an intelligence that will step in and do that for you. Okay, so the ego typically tends to self-serve, whether it be drugs, alcohol, okay, whether it be anger, aggression, fear, any sort of those lower vibrational tendencies, those are self-serving functions of the ego. The ego uses pain oftentimes to define itself, to define its own existence, because the ego, in fact, would rather feel pain than zilch it. So that's kind of an interesting thing if you think about it, because the one which is the most egoic, if we would call it the Prince of Darkness or whatever, the ironic thing about the Prince of Darkness is the fact that if you were to actually put the Prince of Darkness in the dark where there was no one to see it, and no one to recognize it as a god, okay, then it would be scared. They would be begging out to get at it. The fact is, there'd be nothing there as a representation to get worship from. There'd be nothing there as a representation to identify who you are. Okay? And so, basically what ends up happening is you can even feel your own mind, your own soul dissipating into nothing. And that's the thing is, the Prince of Darkness, if there ever was one, that would probably be the greatest fear, which is the reason why, and I talked about this in the section called Fears, our two greatest fears are fear of the dark and fear of death. That's because that is the ego dissipating into nothing. Okay, so it's the fear of non-existence. And so in terms of Lucifer, Satan, Prince of Darkness, or any of that stuff, that is one of the reasons why they self-serve here and still like to be on top. The Luciferians like to come back over and over and over again and be semi-royalty on places like this, but you know, they're more servants than even we are. They're direct servants of the Queen Bee or the machine. The machine gives them the illusion of wealth and domination for about 30 or 40 years, maybe 50. Then they're dead. And then the elites have to figure out how to reincarnate them back and do soul transfers and everything else. And all that stuff is real, yes. Certainly. So, the ego is that portion of your mind that is constantly nagging at you, okay? It's the one that has all sorts of thoughts that will run in the back of your mind while you're going to sleep, trying to get some rest, and the next thing you know, you're thinking of all the stuff that happened at work. You're thinking of all the embarrassing things that you might have said, or all the things that you didn't do, or all the things that you did do. Okay, it's the thing that keeps your mind occupied at all times. The ego generally tends, okay, well actually, it counts on the fact that you believe that it is you and you are it. And in many cases, I mean, it does kind of work that way. We are all functions of the one, and even the machine is, in fact. Okay, but like I said, it is an autopilot program. So the minute that you stop thinking for yourself, it begins to think for you. Alright? And so, it could be the thing many times that gets you into situations. Sometimes it can be the stuff that gets you out of situations, because I've seen more than not, at least with myself, if I can feel that my ego is being triggered for any reason whatsoever, I usually know then to do the opposite of whatever I was going to do. Okay? The ego helps me personally navigate this reality, helps me navigate the world. And the other thing is, you gotta understand that this whole machine thing is literal. It is a true AI engine, and it has gotten smart, and it does think. And I want you to understand that it is literally running algorithms and trying to balance everything that's going on in this world. Every last little thing. Okay? It's a very smart system. So, what ends up happening here is a lot of people get very disturbed at the idea that there is something like that. I mean, there's even bands out there, Rage Against the Machine. There's bands called Soundgarden that talk about the machine. Tool talks about the machine. So many bands. There's actually even tons of movies. Things that you may think are fictitious, I'm telling you right now, is a little bit more real than you can imagine. But the machine is there. It's an intelligence. And the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of people approach the idea of this machine as some sort of an enemy, when in fact You don't even need to build things up like that for yourself. All you need to know is that through your thoughts and actions, you can actually program your own reality separate to what, say, the autopilot program has planned. And the autopilot program is what gets you into jobs that you don't like, gets you into situations that you don't like, has you dealing with people oftentimes that may not be the type of people you want to be around. Okay, the ego is the program that has itself set aside to do those sort of things. So if you're not enacting in your own life to do the creative control and to take the reins, well then there's all these jobs that'll be open and everything like that, and then the ego takes over. Instead of you creating your own thing or really setting up a plan and going for goals, you just go to whatever is easy. Find a job, apply, get the job, work there for a while. Most of the time be miserable, always every minute while you're on the job wanting to be off the job. So you have to consider that the ego has had quite the influence over reality for a good duration. The ego, the machine, is the creator of all of our institutions, okay? Religion, education, you name it, ego. The machine. The machine fostered all that through mankind. So, it's important to embrace and love the ego because it's, unfortunately, in many ways, like I said before, it is a part of you, but it is not necessarily you. The genuine part of yourself thinks in a unified fashion. Okay? It respects life. It respects family. Okay? It respects every single being as being equal and sentient. Okay? That's the genuine self. The ego self is the one that is always constantly comparing itself to others, trying to be better than others, okay? Always trying to find reasons to think of yourself as higher, smarter, stronger, faster, you name it, whatever. The ego is that portion that pushes that drive in you, okay? It is the force there that engages in competition, wars, okay? And don't get me wrong, there's certain aspects of competition that can be very good and very beneficial for mankind, but there's plenty that are not. There's plenty of things out there because people are hair trigger happy these days. Plenty of things out there that we could be going to war over if we're going to go to war, but some of the stuff that we're doing definitely is not worth it for that. Okay, my personal opinion is if you're going to go to war for some reason, then it must be to stop someone who is just too far gone on a homicidal, genocidal war path. The fact of the matter is, most of the people that we've been taking out recently have been no threats to us or anybody else. So I don't have much respect for the idea of what we've been doing there. And I say we, as in the United States of America. So I don't really have much to say. I don't want to get into politics, because that's not what this is about. But I can say politics is also born of the ego. One must understand the resonance, the vibration. The ego is very crafty, it's very intelligent. Again, makes you believe that it's 100% you doing the thinking for you. And sometimes it'll put the most weird, odd, and twisted things into your mind. Remember, your brain is a sender and a receiver of information. A sender and a receiver. So in other words, whatever RF frequencies or electromagnetic waves are bouncing up and out there, your mind is picking up and is actually interpreting even if you don't know it on a conscious level. Your brain is sitting there surfing those waves and sitting there trying to decode them to the best of its ability. So, fortunately I was able to keep talking there, but we were almost completely interrupted by those people that were down there. They just were almost seemingly, because they were looking up at me and they were seemingly trying to talk over this, but we got through it. Now, always remember, you are not at the mercy of someone else's game unless you choose to be. Your free will is there so you can create your own world, okay? One of the best ways, though, to create your own world and to create it flawlessly is to make sure that you have your ego under control. If something is started, something is begun on the foundation of ego, then eventually it will fall. Okay? So, nonetheless, that chapter is called Understanding the Ego. Unconditional love to all.